Welcome, welcome. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. Super excited to be with you guys tonight. Welcome to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, where we focus on God, family, and country. And today, this episode is brought to you by Jase Medical, Jase medical.com. And if you go to their website, you can not only get a year supply of antibiotics, which are critical, but you can also get a year supply of your normal routine medicines now. So if you go to jasemedical.com and you click on the daily, and then you can type in your medicine, what you're taking. They have 75 medicines on there that you can get a year supply. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover, it's not covered by insurance, but if you use code PrepperTalk, you'll get $10 off your supply of medication. So until you can get good at herbs and other more natural things, make sure you get your medicines and your supply of medicines at jasemedical.com. Thank you so much. Today, this episode, we're going to talk about some common misconceptions. Most people think that preppers are pessimistic and sky is falling and everything's horrible and life sucks. And today we want to prove that wrong. We want to prove that preppers are actually some of the most optimistic people on the planet. And the thing is, preppers are optimistic. Prove us wrong. So here we go. Let's start talking about the optimism of prepperhood.
Well, Paris, I think right off the bat, you're wrong. I think right off the bat, as I was getting ready for this, because I consider myself an optimist, and Mike is obviously a pessimist. I'm trying to type here. My keyboard's not working, but the year is there's still half the year left, Mike. There's still 50% of the year. It's not half gone. The cup is half full, right? No, it's... I think I'm more of what's the term? The term is defensive pessimist. I think that's what I am, more than just an optimist. I think I'm a defensive pessimist. So I'm going to argue with you a little bit. I think one of the myths out there of optimists is that you're either an optimist or you're a pessimist. You're one or the other. You're not both. I don't think that's true at all. I think there's a healthy mix of both. I think you need to be both. And I think in general, I would like to say in general, preppers are pessimists, but I think they're more defensive pessimists than optimists.
You're going to have to explain the defensive pessimist a little more.
Okay.
Because I'm calling BS, but go ahead.
Oh, you're calling BS on me, not on the optimist, Well, you think about, okay, what are the negatives of being a pessimist or being of an optimist? There's obviously some drawbacks to being an optimist, right? If you're too optimistic, you're never going to prepare for anything, right? Because, everything's going to turn out fine, because the optimist looks for, what's the end result going to be, right? Rather than a prepper prepares because he's pessimistic about the future, right? Because he's pessimistic about what could happen, not optimistic about what could happen. We're optimistic about our approach. About the difference is between attitude and action. It's not just go ahead.
Let me read this to you, because this you're like almost quoting dictionaries.com. So dictionary.com says an optimist is a person who tends to be hopeful and confident about the future or the success of something, right? Only an eternal optimist could expect success, is their quotes. But the philosophy is a person who believes that this world is the best of all possible worlds, or that good must ultimately prevail over evil.
And we know that's not true. I mean, in the long term, yes, that's true. But right now, at this moment, that's not true.
Day in and day out, sometimes it's hard to believe that, huh?
Yeah, but it's also like, okay, I'm gonna throw back to a movie that most of us watched 20 plus, actually 30, 40 years ago, The Never-Ending Story. Do you guys remember that movie?
I do.
I remember it, but I don't remember it.
Do you remember the swamp that they had to go through, he and his horse Artax?
Oh, yeah, yes. Okay.
The swamp of
like the bog of misery or whatever.
Yeah, the swamp of eternal misery or something like that.
Yeah. Dude. And his
swamp
horse
of despair
up and was like, screw this, I'm done. But Atreyu was like, no, I'm gonna find Mog or what, I don't remember. He's like, I'm gonna find a way. And he was like, he had to remain hopeful. And he just pushed and he pushed and he pushed. But he was in despair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, if that wasn't a perfect forerunner for what today's life is like, I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the news, it's all rainbows and
Really.
Just let's screw your whole life over with all the different murders, and then there's the Hillary campaigns that we get buried in the media, and then there's the Biden things that are going on, and it's like it's gloomy.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the pessimist, right? You go to the definition of pessimist. A pessimist describes a state of mind of someone who always expects the worst. I expect the worst in everything. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be optimistic about my overall outcome, right? But I expect the worst to happen, and that's why I'm preparing. Right?
You expect the worst, but you always hope for the best.
I do hope for the best. Honestly, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I
try.
If I always hope.
That's
hoping
the optimism.
Well, okay, so us preppers who are ready, those who are prepared and ready, right? We want this to come crashing down. We want the system to collapse. You want World War III. I mean, generalizing, right? It's very general, right? And we want to bring on the SHTF. We want to prove ourselves, right? That's the optimistic. That's the defensive pessimist right there, right? So I think that's me. I'm still thinking about this, right? I'm still working through this.
But I don't think you're far off. Like, I think that, yeah, we are crazy enough to believe, they say conspiracy theorists and preppers are crazy and they're doomers, right? We're crazy enough to believe that we can get through what's coming.
Yeah.
That's hopeful.
That's hopeful. That's optimistic.
Because the long term is that things will get better after they get worse.
Mm-hmm.
The short term, it's like, okay, how can I make today as good as I can make today? And it's like, okay, well, the best thing I can do is actually do some more preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
I can can some food today. I can make efforts to learn something that'll help me through harder times. Our last episode, we talked about skills, some things that I think you as listeners would probably love. We kind of got into the prisoner's mindset and some things you learned from some police officers, friends of mine. But like at the end of the day, it's like, take the best of whatever worst situation that's coming. That's what preppers are trying to do, is overcome it and make the best of it.
So does that make you a pessimist or an optimist? Because which one of the two drives a person to prepare? Is it optimism or is it pessimism?
So here's the conversation that I have online. Like, more than anything, everyone would rather just die. Pessimist. Except for the preppers who are like, no way, man, we can get through this.
But that's an optimist. So it's definitely a blend of both. It's not either or, right?
The preppers are the ones that are telling me that they want to get through this. They're hopeful that there's a solution, that they can survive whatever. It's the pessimists that are like, I'd just rather die. It's only going to get worse. I'd just rather die.
But the thing and that's true. And the thing with the optimist is the optimist doesn't necessarily think about the negative things that could happen. It's not. It doesn't kind of usually plans for the good outcome and not the negative outcome. That's where the pessimist comes in. The pessimist thinks, okay, what are all the bad things that could happen? Optimist doesn't necessarily do that. Am I right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think being an optimist is your current state of mind, right? Your current state of emotion, right?
Okay.
But you're also recognizing, as you and I do, and obviously Paris, we're recognizing that crap's going sideways all over the place, and we've got to do everything we can to be better prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. But that's also
yet we're still hopeful. And we're still eager for the collapse so that we can actually look like badasses. Beep that out.
No,
we can look like dudes that actually know what's going on in life, right? We can be like, look what I could do while we plant our veggies, right? But it's getting through it, ultimately prevailing over all the crap that's coming.
So it's about perspective, right?
I think it is. I think it's more about perspective, like, because we're subscribing to hope amidst all the volumes of horrid things that are coming our way, right?
If you think of the extremes as on the far side, there's optimism, and on the other far side of that is pessimism. A prepper kind of really is brought into the middle more of somebody who's a realist. Look, I recognize that crap is going where it's going, and the world, and there's tyrants, and there's wicked and evil people. However, that's the pessimist recognizes that it's there, it's real, and there's no getting out of it. But the optimist is what prevails. in getting us to the point where we believe that we can survive it. We believe that we can prepare for it. I believe that I can build the skill sets necessary to get through it. If you were a true pessimist and the sky was falling, you're just going to go out in the field and just lay down and die.
That's depression. That's anxiety, right? That's
exactly
the things that hold us back and keep us from moving to making action.
It would be the optimism in you that would say, no, I'm not going to go just lay down and die. I'm not just going to kneel down at the demands of the tyrant. I'm not going to just kneel down and let them take away my God-given rights. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight and I'm going to move forward and I'm going to do what I can to be prepared, to be ready, to be self-reliant, to be self-sufficient. If everything goes to crap and I've got to rebuild it, I know how to do it. I know how to build societies. I know how to build houses. I know how to build all these things. Or I know that I can figure it out. That's the optimist in this whole scenario. And that's what I think that preppers are really more optimistic. When you really dig in, I think you'll find that preppers are really, if you define it that way anyways, I mean, we're in a world of redefining terms all the time right now. So let's redefine it, you know?
Yeah.
To me, that's an optimist, somebody who knows that, look, everything's, and just to bring back, we haven't brought in Jordan Peterson in a long time. And he's a self-proclaimed, he's a self-proclaimed pessimist. But he has a recognition that if you work diligently, you can have it work out and it will all be okay. And so he even shares, he says, to me, it's a miracle that I can walk outside and I'm not going to get bombed or killed or get in a fight with my neighbor. Like, to me, that's always a miracle. And that's like, so what is that, pessimism?
Sure, is it optimism? Well, I think you said it. The difference is know-how. The difference is knowledge between the two, right? If you don't know how to solve your problems or how to get to the end of whatever it is your journey, whatever that is, you can be pretty pessimistic. But if you have that knowledge and know-how and you're working on those skills and you have that hope, you're optimistic for the final outcome. Otherwise, it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
So, okay, you went straight to the psychologist. You went straight to to Jordan Peterson. In my head, I'm like, I got David Goggins pumping, and he's like,
"Oh no, that's true.
It's a lifestyle." Boom. He's like, and so I'm like, I'm over here looking at all these quotes from David Goggins, and it's like, I don't stop when I'm tired. I stop when I'm done. Right?
Yeah.
We all want to take things, take this 4-lane highway, but we always step over the shovel. All I did was pick it up and make my own path. Right? He's like, everything comes down to actually facing the hard and going head to head with the hard. And it's like, you do that and you become resilient, you become stronger. And it's like the pessimistic stuff, the things that you think are going to destroy you, are just like another step on the ladder to climb to the top.
Build you. That's the anti-fragility we've been talking about too. Like the harder your obstacle in front of you. Like, I love Ryan Holiday in his Stoic book. The obstacle is the way. So that's, if you want to accomplish something great, you face off with your obstacle. You look the devil in the face, so to speak, and you tell him, no, not today.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that's the optimist recognizing that. The pessimist is, look, the devil's in front of me, the obstacle's in front of me. What do I do about it? Is where the optimist takes over and says, I'm going to overcome it. And that's the optimist, that the prepper. I think that's where preppers are more optimistic than they are pessimistic, because I think they can do something about it.
If we can't agree that it's optimistic or pessimistic, is it preptimistic?
There we go.
That sounds like some shaman. I'm a preptimist.
Well, you think about David Goggins. He ran 100 miles when he was 100 pounds overweight, and he did it, and he finished it. He did the hard thing and got through it. Are most people going to be able to do that? No. They're not. I mean, I couldn't even walk 50 miles. I tried. I couldn't do it. And I think I've related that story before, but so when you get to the hard, are you then a pessimist? How can you get through that hard? Like Goggins, I mean, he's very motivational that way, and get through that pessimistic, because you're not always going to be optimistic. I mean, I can't always be optimistic. Like when you get to that, I get to mile 28 and my feet just cramp up and I just can't go. I mean, could I have limped along another 22 miles. Yeah, I probably could have, but it would have been absolute torture. But that's what Goggins put himself through,
You
doing
need
100
to
miles.
Goggins that crap next time and just.
And I
push
didn't know
through.
Goggins at the time. Right? So that's my excuse. So I need to do that again. But anyway, so I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's if I were to choose one or the other, I think I would still choose pessimist.
Okay. That's
But
interesting.
like I said, I'm still working through this.
Still working through it.
I'm still working
It's like,
through this.
okay, I look at it this way. It's like, okay, we actually have, like, maybe we're just deluded and we're fooling ourselves as preppers, thinking I can handle this, thinking I can do this. And maybe I'm getting a little too close to what David Goggins is saying and not close enough to what he does to be able to prove myself through it, right? But he says it is so easy to be great nowadays because most people are weak. And then the follow-up to that is that it hurts, but that is all it does. The most difficult part of the training in your training your body and in your mind is you have to build calluses on your feet to withstand the road, and you have to build calluses on your mind to endure everything. Right?
It's pretty pessimistic, though. That's a pretty pessimistic outlook on life in general. But he's putting himself into those things. He's not putting himself into the easy life, right? Into the easy path.
He wants it the hardest that it can possibly be.
Which it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be.
I'm like that. I'm like, dude, I want to look at my journey and go, hey, there are times of crap, and I got through that. And there are times, because in all things there has to be opposition. There has to be bad for you to understand good. There has to be sorrow so you can understand joy or happiness, right? And so there are times, and you guys, I've called you guys when I've been pissed off and struggling and frustrated, and you guys will talk me not off the cliff because I'm never at the cliff, but talk me out of the dump, right?
Yep.
And I've done the same for both of you, and we've all done that for people in our lives. And it's like, just because, like, I'm always going to be an optimist, and I hold steadfast to preppers or optimists because we are hoping we can get through the challenges to the other side of the journey. And we're doing all these things. We're building, first and foremost, faith by acting on the word of Christ, by mimicking Noah in our preparedness, right? No, it was just as important to get on the ark in Noah's time as it is to have food storage in our time, right? Food storage, water, all the basics, all the necessities. It's just as important in our time as it was to board the ark. And nobody else boarded the ark besides Noah's family.
I think a really good optimist is going to have a significant level of pessimism in his outlook, in his overall makeup. And the difference for me is what wins out. What overcomes, what's the greater of the two? And if someone is gonna, for example, if the crap hit the fan, EMP happened, and electricity went out, the standard person who's purely a pessimist that allows pessimists to win out is just going to say, you know what, we're just all going to die. Let's just, do what we can until we just die. Where an optimist is going to say, yes, this sucks. They're going to recognize the problem, but they're going to look for and find and act out a solution. And that's going to win. That's what wins. And when the solution-oriented person wins, or when that mentality wins, that to me is where the optimism shines. It's a reality check. There's nobody in this world that I can think of, and maybe there's a few people that kind of really lean toward it, but there's nobody that's 100% one way.
Right.
There's going to be a
if
mixture.
They are, that's not good.
Right. So if you're either you can't really be 100% optimist, and you can't really be 100% pessimist. Well, I mean, maybe there are, but in my life, I feel like I have a healthy dose. I was really a big optimist for a long time, and then I had a healthy dose of what we call reality. And
then you met us.
Yeah, my pessimism grew, but then for a period of time, it kind of overpowered me, and it was really depressing and sad. But then I realized, there's solutions to these problems. And when you wake up to what's going on in the world, when you wake up to the potential, the tyranny, the corruption, and when you wake up to all this stuff, there's a period of time, and rightly so, where you're just going to be overwhelmed and perhaps maybe way more than you should in pessimism. However, when you take a minute and process it all, and you come back and say, wait a minute, there's ways out of this. There's solutions out of these problems. I can now be a prepper. I can learn my constitutional rights. I can learn how to be self-defense. I can learn how to garden. I can learn how to get food storage, water storage. I can learn to sew, and the skill sets we talked about in the last episode. Once you start to get on that path, that's when optimism takes over. And the real preppers, that's where I feel like I can argue, at least, and you can hear me argue. And that's the great thing about this topic. We're genuinely having a discussion, debate about it.
A lively discussion.
Yeah. And an optimist, has high expectations, right? A pessimist probably has low expectations, right? So, but that can also be a danger to be a pure optimist that way, to have too high expectations. And I think maybe it's where Jordan Peterson. Sorry, say that again.
Especially when you expect other people to be good.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. When you expect too much of others in general. But also, I think optimists have better coping skills, right? They can get through problems a lot better, a lot easier. And so, I think, like you said, this is a great little debate. Figuring this out in my head, it's good to have both. I think that to have a good balance of being a pessimist and an optimist is important.
And I think that'll change based on perception and experience.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. The things that we experience get us to where we are today. The things that we're going through get us to our state of mind. Right. And now I'm wondering, okay, I guess maybe a realist is the better answer, because the definition of realist is a person who accepts the situation as it is and is prepared to deal with it accordingly. Or accepting a realist view of the world, its problems, but then also its future. And having the desire as an optimist to make that future better than the present. At least for my micro economy, my family, and then my community, right? And then
I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and the guy was on there, and he was talking about all, when the crap hits the fan, what different types of solar battery. He was going through the water, the food. He was going through everything that you'd need to be prepared. And he says, sometimes this can feel depressing, but I feel like it's being prepared. Having all this stuff on hand is more optimistic, because you can do things with it. And I was like, that's so cool that he said that, because that's what we're going to be discussing on our podcast tonight, And so I thought that was really cool, because he was talking about the different things that they were doing. And I got some good downloads from that podcast, actually. So we'll be, converting those and sharing those. But it really, to me, is somebody who is recognizes that, and it is more realistic. I think it's more realism than optimism. But at the end of the day, it's the optimism that wins out over the pessimism that gets us into the place where we can be solution oriented, and we can be somebody who can say, you know what, everything's going to work out. It's going to be okay, because I have the skills and I have the equipment, and I'm ready for this. And that is an optimistic statement.
Well, what about this statement? Is one of the driving things that I do that drives me is I do not want to have any more regrets, right? No regrets. Is that pessimistic or is that optimistic? Seems kind of pessimistic, right?
Yes and no. Yeah, I can see I can see the pessimistic part of it, because you're focusing in on the regrets. But then having no regrets is optimistic, because you don't want to have those anymore. Recognizing that is something that you have to. Scott talked about the law of opposition. There's got to be that. You don't know joy until you've known pain. You don't know optimism until you've known pessimism. And so I believe that a real optimist, somebody who's really optimist, has been into the world of pessimism long enough to recognize it and know it and be a part of it, and then say, I don't want that. And they're on the other side of it now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're exactly right. I think it's hard to get all that experience for ourselves unless we are consciously experiencing that and then applying that to our life. So one of the things that came up to me as I was thinking about this topic is how do I recognize this in my life, and how do I get more experience with this? And one thing that came to my mind is that people who are pessimistic do not read their scriptures enough. They do not know the gospel, right? Because there's a lot of pessimism in there, and there's a lot of optimism. And so I think it's a perfect mixture of both to get that experience of, look what happened. Look at look at history. I mean, and maybe history can be a teacher as well, looking to the past to prepare for the future as well, in this same aspect, right, of optimism and pessimism, looking at the outcomes. We look at history and see, oh, look what has happened to all fiat currencies. They've all collapsed, right? That's really pessimistic. Right. But the optimistic part of that is that, oh, we can start over again, right? Let's bring this all down, and so that we can start over again
and having a solution,
with a better system. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
and have a solution to that.
But it goes to the preparing, the realist side of things. You're preparing to deal with it, right? I am an absolute pessimist when it comes to our government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an absolute optimist when it comes to our people, right? I'm an absolute optimist when it comes to my potential future.
Mm-hmm.
But there are days where I'm a pessimist,
mm-hmm.
where maybe I woke up on the wrong side of bed. I didn't get enough sleep. I didn't have my walk with God in the morning. And so the rest of my day, I'm on my own struggling.
Yeah.
Right. And for lack of a better word, wisdom cannot be gained without going through the fire. And those days are parts of the fire that are necessary to gain wisdom. And I don't want to just waste my life away. And so maybe I'm a little bit like David Goggins mentally, because I'll fight some of those things, but I'm nowhere near, right? It's like he's up here in mental toughness, and I'm like, look what I can do, right? I'm just like,
yeah.
I
think another big part of it is naivete. If somebody is really naive, they can think everything's great, the world is great, everyone's good,
and that's not necessarily optimism.
And that's not that's a faux optimism. I think that's fake optimism.
Yes.
And that's not the kind of optimism I'm talking about when it comes to this. I'm talking about, and that's funny because I tease people that are young and they're 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And I'm like, go out, get a job, get beat up, and then come back and talk to me about entrepreneurship. Like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to know, like I tell my son, he's like, I want to have my own business, Dad. I'm like, you haven't been beat up enough. Like you got to go out and get a job that sucks for years.
You got to lose. You got to lose first.
Yeah. You got to go out and get beat up. And then when you come back, now you're going to be strong enough to get through the tough times of an entrepreneur. And he's like, what does that mean? He's like, can I just start my own business and go? I'm like, sure. But I promise you're going to be way stronger if you go get beat up in the corporate America for a little while and then you go after it. That's part of really being a true optimist, is somebody who's been through the mud and the dirt, cleaned it off, and said, you know what? I know what it's like. And I'm not interested. I'm going to choose a different thing.
There's an example of that one of my friends. She was a waitress. Her husband was a farmer, cotton farmer, and they hated their life and their situation so much that they started their own Amazon fulfillment business.
And if you're an optimist, you're likely not going to do that, right?
Right. You're never going to do that. But they just their situation was they just thought their situation was so bad. They're like, we have to do something to change this. College isn't fast enough. We're going to just go straight into the fire and figure this out. And they figured it out. It was hard. It was hard. But within their first year, they made enough money that they could both quit their jobs, but they didn't. It was the second year that they finally quit their jobs because they had enough money in the back and they had the bankroll coming of revenue that they're like, okay, we feel confident we can keep this going. And then things went whomp and took a dive for a few months because they lacked the discipline to stay on pace with where they'd been. They coasted for a little while, and then they were like, oh wow. And so they doubled down, and their third year went from looking like it was going to be a bust about halfway through to 4 times better than the years before.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it was what you talked about just then. It's like, you've got to get beat up. You've got to allow yourself to get beat up, go through the fight to get to the other side. Yeah, to see what you're capable of, but also to understand what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Because, man, there's days you just don't want to get up and do your job.
Mm-hmm.
As 9 to 5 for somebody else, as well as an independent consultant or as a private contractor, or even as an entrepreneur. There are times, but like as an entrepreneur, you can't take that day off.
Mm-mm.
Unless you own a couple businesses that are completely managed by other people and you're kind of partially involved, right? Like you have to get to that point. You've got to go through a bigger fight to get there, a bigger challenge. You got to climb a bigger mountain. And that's the same thing with prepping. It's like, whether you're an optimist, whether you're a pessimist, whether you think you can or you think you can't, at the end of the day, you're right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I was thinking is like preparing for a talk in church or preparing for a piano recital or some performance or something like that, right? For me, speaking of myself, the whole time I'm just dreading this. I'm a pessimist. This is going to be horrible. I'm going to fail. It's going to be terrible. But you push through, you do the hard thing, and you do what you're planning on doing, what you want to do well, and in the end, you get a good result, which then increases your optimism of the hard thing you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's explaining myself well enough, but I think we do that every day. In my own job, in our own jobs, like right now, I was telling you guys, I'm dealing with this problem, and it's just killing me, and I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done this before. I've had problems before, and we've solved them. And in the end, maybe not everybody's happy, but it gets done and it's resolved. And at that point, I'm like, whew. And that's the optimist in me, because I can see the end from the beginning.
And it's also the experience. It's not your first rodeo. Like, I remember when we first started this radio show before it became a podcast, and every week you're like, I really don't want to do this.
I don't want to do this.
You're like, oh, and we botched like every intro. We're like, welcome to, what are we doing today? Oh yeah, we're on air. Oh, hey, yeah, hi everybody. Like we botched it,
and we didn't get kicked off the air, so
we didn't. Something yeah, right. we volunteered ourselves off the air after 3 years, and then moved to here. But we had to go through those to learn and grow, and I feel like we're a lot better, even though sometimes we're like, I really don't want to do this today. But we do it, and we then at the end of the episodes, when we get off this live with you guys, like we have a few minutes kind of wrap up, just the three of us, and we're like, man, I'm so glad we did this. It was so much fun, and I love helping people get prepped, and we're like, what can we do more? And it's funny because this leads to more how we can help, and that's why our Facebook group is so important. Get involved there. That's why our email list is so important. Make sure you subscribe. Go to preppertalkradio.com and become part of the community, because on your bad days, you're going to want to be with us so you can get through them better. And we want to help you. And then likewise, on our bad days, you guys help us, give us purpose and reason to do what we're doing. Most people won't go out and talk about what they're doing to prep. It's a no-no in the industry, right? The first rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club, we don't talk about Fight Club. Same goes for prepping. First rule of prepping, we don't talk about prepping to non-preppers. Second rule of prepping, we don't talk about prepping to non-preppers. But here we are telling and divulging everything, because it's our mission to help people get better prepared, to make the stigmas of prepping go away and make the practical sense of it part of your life. It is about making preparedness and optimism a little bit, maybe realism, a way of life.
Yep.
Because it is the only sustainable method of life. Everything else is fragile.
You have to be strong enough. I feel like you have to be strong enough to be self-reliant, meaning do it. You're independent enough that you can do everything yourself. But when you're working with other independent individuals in an interdependent way, you're all able to synergistically work together to create a better result. So if I can do it myself, and you can, like, if let's say we come upon a situation and I could solve it, and Scott could solve it, Shane could solve it, we could all solve it. We could either fight about who gets to solve it, or we could work together and solve it 3 times as fast. Yeah. Because you work on one part, I'll work on one part, and Shane works on another part. And then before we know it, it's done like 3 times as fast as if one of us was doing it.
Or 3 times better.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many value points when you start putting a group together to do things, to figure things out. Right. That's
optimism to me. To me, that's optimism. Like we can three come together instead of competing about who's going to be better and cooler and get it done. We can synergistically work together and find a better solution even than any one of us could on our own. And to me, that's leaning towards an optimism.
Well, here's I think is a better word for optimism, because optimism and pessimism is kind of just psychological babble, right? It's not really action, right? The word faith is optimism and action, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Does that sound right? And I'm thinking that through this as I speak, right? Faith is moving forward, taking action, doing things that are optimistic, and so optimism just expresses a feeling, a state of mind, whereas faith is what causes us to move to action.
And I'll just add, in faith, there's that word hope. Hope is in hope and faith kind of come together to make that something that that I think really works.
If all you have is hope, great. Start with hope. That will move to faith.
Mm-hmm. So when you put us together, when you put your group together, right, you as a listener, I want you to think of yourselves as like a Belgian draft horse.
Mm-hmm.
A Belgian draft horse. You can do a ton. A Belgian draft horse is one of the strongest horses in the world. It can pull, like, they weigh about 1,400 pounds to 2,000 pounds. And they can pull like 3,000 pounds to 4,000 pounds on their own.
14,000 pounds on their own.
Is it 14,000 on their
14,000 pounds.
Oh, that's right. 14,000 pounds on their own. But when you put them together, they can pull how many thousand pounds?
32,000 pounds.
32,000.
But more than doubles their capability.
That's the craziest part, right? That's
I'm probably off there though.
It's drastic. It's a huge improvement when you start putting more of them together. They can pull greater and greater loads. Yeah. And that's the thing about preppers. Like we're going through hard workouts now, like learning how to cook and clean and do everything without the grid, right? Learning how to make our own food, grow our own food. Hey, Justin, thanks for joining live. Doing all these things, raising chickens, putting in gardens, putting up Quonsets, right? Building buildings, doing all these hard things now so that when we get put together, we're twice as strong as we could have been alone.
Or more, yeah.
Or more.
Yeah. And it's not that, I mean, the one horse by himself, the one person by ourselves, we don't necessarily know our full potential. Like when you put those two Belgian horses together, they work off each other and feed and do more than they could do alone. By far.
So, Utah Mike, to answer your question, how much do those horses eat? They say about 3% of their body weight daily.
Dang.
And I eat about 20% of my body weight daily. So I'm kidding. I don't. That would be horrible.
Dude, you should be way bigger.
That's part of the problem.
That'd be 5 pounds of food for me if that was 3%.
Well, but yeah, that's 3%. Holy smokes, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of hay. It's a load of hay is what it really is. But man, I love this discussion. I love this dialogue about are we optimists? Are we pessimists? Are we realists? I still feel like I'm more of an optimist. I still feel like preppers. I think the right thing is I feel like preppers are more cheerful about the dire consequences we're all in. Because not because we have rose-colored glasses on, but because we got this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We believe through the experiences we've already come through in life and the trials we've already overcome that we can keep going. And we believe that the world's going to be a better place because of who we are and what we're doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's great because it's purposeful life. And I hear so many times people are like, oh, I just don't feel like I have a purpose. Well, you're not living correctly.
Yep. You may need to take a few minutes and really dig in and figure out what's why. In fact, I was reading the scriptures with some of my youth that I'm in charge of at church, and we were reading in I think it's John chapter 18 where Christ is brought before Pontius Pilate, And Pontius Pilate says, "Are you a king?" And Christ answers, "To this end was I born. For this cause came I into the world." Christ knew who he was. He knew his purpose. He knew why he was born. And I asked the boys, they're like 14, 15-year-old kids. I said, "Do you know why you were born? Do you know why you were put on this earth? Do you know why you are here and what your goal is and what your purpose is?" And I'm like, you don't have to answer that. I'm just saying that's a question for you guys to go and ponder and think about during the week is why are you here and what are you doing? Right. And I definitely believe one of the purposes that the three of us have is helping people get better prepared in every part of their life, not just food storage, but also recognizing the mental toughness that it takes to be a prepper. That's mental toughness that can be translated into any area of life. Yeah. There's just so much that we have that we're capable of as human beings that we often live beneath our privileges. We live beneath our strengths. We just live in a way that that if we were put our mind to it, we could have so much more than we have. And I'm just looking in the mirror right now saying to myself, man, what am I? I'm talking to myself here because there's so much more I could be doing with my own life. So we're about 45 minutes in, guys. You want to wrap it up, or do you have any final
just one thing I wanted to say is we need to find out what our purpose is. But for me, I want to say, what is your specific purpose? I think that for me, that word is important, adding that specific purpose in there, because we all have especially that we're born now in this time of the planet, of the end of times, end of days. We all have a specific purpose for being here at this time. And that's my challenge to you, is figure out what that specific purpose is.
Amen to that, brother. So Shane kind of alluded to the fact that when the economy goes to crap, we have solutions, and we do with ITM Trading. Go to learn.itmtrading.com/prepper talk and get a free consultation on how gold and silver can be a part of your portfolio, and gold and silver can be something that's an important part of your financial plan. We highly recommend gold and silver. If the economy collapses, not necessarily if, I should say, when the economy collapses and the dollar devalues to the point where we're having wheelbarrows full of it to go buy wheat or loaves of bread, every major world power, economic, financial system has been reestablished on gold and silver. So I promise you're not going to regret having a stash of gold and silver, and ITM Trading is a fantastic place. They got a great education. It's no obligation. Go to learn.itmtrading.com/prepper talk. And you've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio for the ready-minded, where we focus on God, family, and country. We're so grateful to have you as listeners and to be with us in this community. So we'll see you on the next one.
See you next week.